Hello, and welcome to Building Department 101. I'm your host, Bill Forty. I'm also your Inspector of Buildings for the City of Waltham. Today I have two special guests here from the Downtown Waltham Partnership, Doug Waybright and Lisa Lorgery. I said your name correctly. Good. Today's topic is we're going to be discussing a little bit about small business in Waltham. This is a show that we've been anticipating for quite some time, and we really hope that you get the right information about being able to start your small business in Waltham. Downtown Waltham, where Moody Street is, a lot of small stores, a lot of people get excited about starting a small business, and they work hard, and they put everything they have into starting a small business, and then they run into some complications. So we're going to discuss a little bit today about some of the problems that people have and some of the requirements for starting a small business in Waltham. So we're going to go right into it, and welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be discussing a few different technical aspects and some more simpler ones. So the first question, and I had asked the Downtown Waltham Partnership to give me the 10 most pressing questions. We try to compact it into a little bit less than 10 questions because we only have a certain amount of time. But we've tried to pretty much generalize some of the issues that people have with starting a small business, and it's usually these types of problems. So when is a commercial building permit required? That's the first question. And Lisa, if you could just kind of elaborate a little bit on this question.
Sure, Bill. First of all, thank you for having us. We really appreciate this. So as downtown, when new businesses come in, it's kind of like, I want to come in, I want to open up a business, now what? There's a lot of challenges. They sign a lease, and then they're completely lost. So can you just guide us through some of this?
Sure. So there are several different requirements when starting a business. There's the zoning. There are several different laws and ordinances, one being the zoning ordinance, where any use of a building is required to have what's called a certificate of occupancy. In addition to that, there are building code requirements, accessibility requirements. There are also requirements for the city clerk's office. There are several different things. If it involves food, it's usually the health department. If there's any work associated with it, but some of the more basic answers would be whenever construction or alteration is performed. Now, that may not be any hard construction as you would commonly call it, like moving walls and changing doors and putting in new drop ceilings. Construction actually could be related to the changing of shelving or the changing of a counter. Something as simple as changing a counter could require accessibility requirements, whereas the counter has to be 36 high, minimum 36 wide, and the entrance going into the building has to be also changed. So in accordance with the zoning ordinance, section 7.41, it's required that businesses or uses of buildings have to be approved by the building department. Usually what we try to do is we try to get people to draw up a simple floor plan. It all depends on whether or not there's construction related to it. But we try to ask people to just give us a simple floor plan, a simple description of the business, along with the authorization from the building owner. That's the person who owns the property that you're leasing from. And this is one of the big things, is the I&I certificate, which is basically infiltration and inflow. We're going to talk a little bit about that.
Great.
Because this is a frustrating thing for a lot of people. I believe it was probably 7 to 8 years ago, the Mass Department of Environmental Protection came in and found that there were several freshwater leaks going into the sewer system. There was what's called a consent order, where a consent order requires that a city or town provide repair of these sewers and these places where fresh water is getting into the sewer system, because it costs money to clean sewer. So in those processes, a program was set up and an ordinance change was made that an I&I form has to be done, which is infiltration and inflow. Basically what this is any change of the water flow or the use of the property has to be calculated by a civil engineer and been determined as to whether or not there is more water usage for that property. If there's an increase in water usage, fees get paid into a fund in which that fund is used to repair the water leaks going into the sewer system. So almost in every case, unless there's absolutely no change in the occupancy, in other words, if you're going from a convenience store to a convenience store, there would be no I&I required by my office. But if you were going from a convenience store to a hairdresser, that may increase the flow. So in that case, it would be required.
So if I was going from a convenience store to a retail boutique shop, would that pull
That's
an
a
I&I?
change of use. Now, that form would have to be filled out. It doesn't necessarily mean that there would be a fee associated with it, but it does have to be calculated. So any significant change to the space could require at least the form being filled out.
Even though I'm not using
So
water and
that's
so
correct.
forth.
You're talking about a building permit application.
With the building permit application, there would be an I&I form which is available at the Consolidated Public Works Department, and they would give you instructions on how to fill out what you need to fill out, and then that would be approved by an official at CPW.
Right.
So it may not necessarily mean that there's any change of use, or that it may not even require a civil engineer to do that calculation if there is no change. But in cases where a use is changed, we don't make the determination as to whether or not it increases water flow. So that determination is made solely by CPW and engineering. So, okay.
So when you say construction too, so it's not a typical type of construction. So I'm a boutique store, and it's a blank space. It was like a CPA's office or something. By me hanging shelves, just shelves to display my product, does that constitute pulling construction?
Not exactly, no.
Okay.
So that would not fall under the requirements of construction control, which I'll go into in the next window, but a simple floor plan, again, may constitute that a permit is needed. So there's a difference between having a permit required and having construction control and construction documents. So a significant change to the floor plan would require that, especially if you're going from, say, a retail to a restaurant. That is significantly different. That may require an architect.
But if I'm not doing, I think we've talked about this before, if I'm not doing any construction and I'm not changing the use, do I need to come and pull a building permit?
If you are a convenience store and you are changing hands of management and you're making no changes to the floor, then no. It would not be required to come to the building department and acquire a permit, because there's been no change of use. There's been no change of use, no change of floor plan. And if you come to change just the sign, we can issue a sign permit to change that sign, provided that there's no changes inside the space that you're going to be leasing. If there are changes, you can acquire ownership first and then come to us and make those changes. We will tell you if a building permit is required. So the permits aren't required for everything, but we want to make sure that you always can come to us and ask us those questions. That's the most important thing.
I have a very specific one. If I'm an office tenant, I'm going to have a new tenant, and I'm going to paint and carpet. That's all I'm going to do.
Painting is not, there's no building permit required for painting. If it's carpet and it's a large amount of carpet, we may want documentation on the flammability of that carpet. But that would be in an instance much bigger than the space you're talking about, which would be maybe under 2,000 square feet. That wouldn't really necessarily constitute a building permit. But in areas where we have these large commercial buildings where they're replacing 10 or 12,000 square feet of carpet, then yes, we would want a building permit just for recognition of the smoke envelope rating of the material that you're putting on the floor. So,
Great.
so the next question is, what sequence of approvals are required, and how long does it take? So this is a big one, and I'll leave it up to you, Doug. People get frustrated all the time with the process. Usually the building department gets the bad rating on this because it took me 6 months to get a building permit, yet the 5 months before they submitted that permit application was all the requirements that someone has to go through prior to the application submission of a building permit. So give me a little example about that.
Well, the thing that in Waltham specifically that adds to the frustration is the I&I. Because people come in, they have no idea, first of all, what it is. If you're in Waltham, you understand it. So that's a delay. You go, you pull a building permit, you fill it out, you need it signed by the owner, and then next you bring it back and say, now what? And you have to go up to engineering. And there's another form. And probably you'll have to get an engineer to do the calculations. And so it's time, money, then you come back down and you're ready to go, and then you start your construction process.
Sure.
So it takes 6 months.
Right. So the I&I, the problem with the I&I is that the engineering department is not under a time constraint. The building department, however, is. We have 30 days to issue a permit or deny it. Until an application is completed, we really can't accept it in, because then we can't make the determination that it's compliant with everything. For all commercial construction, after all the requisite approvals, we have 30 days by law. Not every department has that kind of mandate, but we do. So we try to make sure that the application's complete. A person could avoid that kind of confusion if they come to our department first. My inspectors and my admin staff are required, when you come in to get information about what do I need to do to start a business, the first thing they need to do is they come into us and we give them the list of required documents for that particular space. So we listen to what they're doing, whether it's going to be a change of use, whether it's going to be a business to a business, and then we will give you the requirements there. My staff should initial that checklist that they're giving to you, the date it was and the address. So that should all be written on that form. Mm-hmm. And then when you come back into the building department, you want to try to speak to the same individual, because every case is uniquely different. Sometimes there might be one or two factors that change all of this, whereas you don't exactly have the exact same situation. A barbershop and a barbershop could be significantly different depending on the number of people that are there, the number of stations and so forth, and all these things do play a role. So always try to consistently get the same person to speak to every time. Your approvals will go a lot better. If you come in and someone has a fresh perspective and a look, they may find something different that might have been missed the first time. So you always want to make sure you speak to the same person, and usually my staff is accessible and readily available. So. So the complexity, as I said, will determine the number of steps and the time involved. But again, you want to speak to specifically the same person every time you come into the building department, and that will definitely help you expedite your permit process, because that person knows what they told you for requirements. So, and then a simple tenancy, same business, same type of business, the same category as defined in the building code. will really be the least amount of time. So if you're making simple changes to the floor plan, again, no construction control required. The I&I form may be something simple to fill out. Hey, listen, I don't really need an engineer. I'm not really changing and CBW or engineering can make that determination to whether or not a civil engineer needs to do a calculation. So it's not really all the time. So what types of plans, engineer drawings, and stamps are required? Any one of you want?
Well, I mean, some people are confused too on, when do they have to put in like handicap bathrooms, and how do they do this, and they are changing the floor plan, and when we talk to them about even simple things as signs, engineering stamps and so forth. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure. So any building over 35,000 cubic feet, which most tenant spaces are located in a building which exceeds that volume. The requirements under the state building code is that the space or the construction needs to be designed by registered professional engineers or architects. This is what's called construction control. In most cases, construction control is when there's any change to the physical portions of the building in which are trying to accommodate your business. So an architect or engineer should have all of those questions and requirements. It's very rare that we get a set of plans that doesn't comply with the building code or the accessibility code. And so those professionals should be able to guide you through and help you to understand what changes are necessary. In certain cases, if a configuration, let's take fast food, because that's kind of a real tough one for people to understand. The requirement for the number of seats, okay? If you're under 50 seats, you fall into a fast food category. But it's not only that; it's the percentage of the gross floor area that is used for preparation. So there are several different mitigating factors that may change the requirements for either having a by right use or a special permit. Again, your architect should be somewhat familiar with the zoning ordinance and should be able to give you some kind of idea as to what type of permitting it is. You don't want to just pay an architect to put lines on paper and say, oh, here you go, here's a design for something you're never going to be able to accomplish. So it would always be good for a person to look into their design and make sure that they're not only familiar with the state building code and the accessibility code, but you want them to have some working knowledge or be able to research the zoning ordinance to accommodate the type of business that they're in. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody have plans drawn up for something that's going to require a special permit or a ZBA variance, and it really is a heartbreak to see somebody spend all that money and then find that they're another 6 months into permitting before they can actually open the doors. So, doing your homework is really is probably the the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean once you get to construction control, you're out on 128, and you're building massive things. Everybody expects this. They know how to do this. They know how to they have their whole list of vendors they use, same guys they used the last time.
Sure.
It's the small guy on Moody Street who just wants to open a simple shop.
Right.
And they don't know nothing from construction control.
Sure.
And that's where the difficulty comes in.
Right. So the thing with construction control is that the 35,000 cubic feet of commercial building, now a person may want to open up a tenant space on Moody Street. There may be residential above that. They may want to go from, say, a retail use to a restaurant. Okay, a restaurant requires a 2-hour fire separation from any occupancies above, residential or otherwise. So in that case, that would be a construction control. Now, if there was really very little change of use, or it was a use, of less hazard, or something like that, then that a designer would be able to tell that person what the requirements are. But anything short of, say, like a bank or a Dunkin' Donuts requires construction control. So in a case where there's really no change of use and we're going from retail to retail and there's no construction involved, there'd be no construction control. There are cases where a construction supervisor, somebody who is licensed to supervise construction, which I have that license, under 35,000 cubic feet, I would be able to control that construction without a design professional on board. So in some cases, we might waive that requirement for construction control for projects that are minor in nature and that don't require any code review or design review. So that would be the big thing. So if let's just say somebody wanted to put up a wall or put in a bathroom, we might waive that requirement because we're allowed to, but only in those cases. Where you have changes to the sprinkler system or the alarm system, that would require a code review and hence construction control.
The alarm system too.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
So the alarm systems.
That's something new.
The
Right.
alarm systems are part of are an integral part of the inspection. Even when you're changing occupancy with no construction, okay, and we require you to submit a little floor plan and say you get to I&I and it was a breeze and everything is good, we still want that floor plan stamped by the fire department, and the fire department wants to come in and do their inspection to make sure that the alarms are active. The fire department's responsible for fire maintenance. The building code, the building department is responsible for fire systems and construction. So they will go and they'll make sure that the certification on the alarm system for the entire building has been current and up to date, and then they'll make sure that your life safety systems, such as fire extinguishers, are in place if they're needed. So that's.
So they come in, they're not doing any construction, no permits need to be pulled, but they have to make sure that they notify the fire department to come in for their fire inspection.
Right. So
Okay,
that
'cause
little.
I'm sure we're going to get into certificate of occupancy
that's
requirements
correct.
soon.
So we would want you to go to the fire department.
Okay.
It's a quick review. They would just stamp it that they know what's in there now,
Yep.
and then they would come in, do their little inspection, whatever it might be. If you're missing a fire extinguisher, then you have the benefit of the fire department knowing that you need that, and it does increase your life safety. So very necessary step. But again, even without construction related, that fire department stamp is necessary. So I'm glad we talked about that because I forgot to include it on the PowerPoint. So all right. So the next question: when does a property need to be brought up to code? This varies in a very wide, it could be a very wide expanse, and again, this is why you have construction control. But if one of you want to tackle this.
This is the one that, this is what is the biggest problem on Moody Street. The reason you go from one dollar store to another dollar store is because the landlord knows that if he wants to put in a restaurant, he's going to has to bring everything up to code. And these buildings were built many, many moons ago. It's all grandfathered, and so they just lease it out the way it is, and there's no increase in value. It's just staying the course. A good example of somebody. So you need to be well heeled in order to pull it off. Now, Moody's Deli is doing it. Josh Smith is well heeled, so he's able to afford the increases, the increased costs due to bringing everything up to code. But the guy who has the dollar store isn't going to do that. So that's the big bugaboo on Moody Street. How do we tackle that?
So cost considerations are always the number one business question. Do I have the venture capital to tackle this? Again, research usually does not cost a lot of money. When people sign a lease, having this big idea, let's just say it's an exercise club. Now, recently we had an ordinance change that allows for small exercise clubs, and I helped to write that. That you could have an exercise club or a health club under 5,000 square feet without a special permit. For years, it had always been in the zoning when it said any exercise club of any size would require a special permit. So we're able to get that fixed. Now, let's just say that a person wants to gymboree. That's one that we can talk about. Here again, if they increased that space, they would have been required to have, it all depends on how many square feet it is, but that would require a unisex shower. Now, if it's not equipped with showers, then you would have to put that in. But these parameters are basically dictated by the building code. We don't make a judgment as to whether or not, we think that your people should have a shower. We don't make those determinations. It's all dictated by the building code and the plumbing codes and the sanitary code as well. So the codes are all related and they're tied in together. I'll give you an example. The health code is a habitability code, yet a lot of what's mirrored in the building code is also mirrored in 105 CMR, which is the Massachusetts Code on Health Regulations. And the reason for that is that so that all these codes are designed to protect persons and property. In a case where in a case where codes are required, we don't make that determination. All we do is we take in a design, we review the plan to make sure it complies with the building code. If it doesn't, then normally we call the design professional to let them know. And unfortunately, there are mistakes sometimes by even the people that went to college to design buildings sometimes miss some things, and it's unfortunate. But we are just there to review the plan to make sure that it meets the requirements of the building, plumbing, and electrical codes. So that's our job. Let's see.
So you bring up the small athletic fitness. So they have to have a shower because some people are just physical trainers and you just go in, you do your work, you go home.
I believe, and don't quote me on this, I'd have to look at the regular, but I believe it's the amount of square feet or the change of use that could trigger off either one of those.
Okay.
So yes, it is a requirement. So let's just say somebody has a Zumba class,
yep,
and that's all they're doing. That may require, that may require the upgrades of having.
And it may, because it'll be decided on square feet. How
it
many
could
people?
be.
Okay.
It very well could be.
Okay.
So I believe, and I don't recall exactly, but I recall in a general way that's usually what requires that. So there are several different mitigations. So when you're looking. When you're looking at starting a business, you want to check a few things. You want to check that the change of use, the dollar value of the building, the fire and life safety upgrades, and et cetera. These are things that your design professional should be doing. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, other considerations, parking, not necessarily on Moody Street because there's no parking requirements on Moody Street. You want to make sure that the building's not in violation. I had a specific one up on Moody Street where there was a violation passed, and there had to be there were some changes made to it, and but the building was in violation. So you want to just do a little research and history of the building to make sure that there are no outstanding issues. Anything from illegal construction to even wireless antennas being in the wrong spot could hold up a permit, because I can't issue a permit. The building department can't issue a permit of a property that's in violation. So
before I sign my lease, I need to do my research on the building that I'm going in there, do my due diligence to make sure that they have a cell repeater or whatever on there. Okay, that's interesting.
You should just make sure that there are no big outstanding issues for any building.
And how would I find that out?
You would come to the building department, and you could also go to the health department, and you could also call the engineering department. Here's an example.
Okay.
Here's an example. Taxes and arrears. This happens all the time,
mm-hmm.
okay? When we have a tax hold on a property, we cannot issue a permit. It's in our ordinance that we must withhold.
Even though I'm a tenant, gonna rent.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. You'll be punished for what your landlord has not performed or done. So there could be a number of things. It could be that sewer mitigation had to be done on that building and it never got done, and we've been requested to hold permits until usually it's an I&I fee, and a person hasn't settled an I&I fee, and then that may hold up the issuance of a building permit. So again, you always want to check and make sure that there are no red flags with any property. And any required changes are always listed in the code rather than decided by the building department. I think I went over that we don't make that discretionary. We don't have much discretion in the matter. It's illegal for us to issue a permit where a handicap bathroom is required, but it isn't listed on the plan. Sometimes we will allow a revised plan to come after the issuance of the initial building permit, and we won't issue a certificate of occupancy until that code upgrade has been done. So we do try to expedite with permits and work with people.
So I have noticed in some of the businesses and so forth that do have to bring up for handicap bathrooms that they only have one instead of two, and it's a unisex one. I mean, is that all determined through with the building department, or do we have to go to another level for that?
So correct. That would actually be in the plumbing code. So the plumbing code that makes that determination. Okay. Again, the plumbing code, the electrical code, the building code are all one and the same. They're all interconnected. So
and that's a one-stop shop at you.
Well, actually, the wires department is separate.
In that particular case, because we've actually done it twice, you can go to the state and get a waiver for one unisex bathroom if you can prove that it's physically impossible to do one.
Correct.
And they grant that.
Yep.
We've gotten 2 of them done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Variances are common especially in accessibility variances where the letter of the code is not practical. I'll give an example: is a handicap accessible entrance off a sidewalk where the floor of the first floor is built up 8 inches and there's no way to get a ramp in there that would comply with the code. In cases like that, they would allow you to have an entrance ramp coming in the back and actually a common hallway through the kitchen, or, I mean, you used to be able to do it through the kitchen. They don't allow that anymore. So it has to be a finished off space, but you can access the building from behind, provided that you have a good reason. And having a business on the sidewalk would be one of those reasons.
But that's at the state level.
Yep, right. Or let's just say you have an office where there's no vertical access to the building. There's never been an elevator in there yet. There has been a real estate office on that second floor, and you wanted to go to something a little bit different. You want to go to a doctor's office. Now you have more patients coming in and out. Something like that might require a variance from the Architectural Access Board, which is the handicap accessibility authority for the state.
Because of the way the building's already made, you can't.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
and there's no way to comply.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no practical way to comply. And maybe those services are offered on the first floor. There are a bunch of different dynamic that the board can require, and I will tell you that the board is lenient in most cases. They have a good common sense board, and their director is actually a handicapped person, so you get the unique view from that person that not only are they handicapped, but they also regulate, and they're very, very fair. So that may be a possibility. So when is a certificate of occupancy required and no change of use? So this is the section in the ordinance that authorizes me to issue an occupancy permit for building structures and uses. So uses being the operative word. So again, we've had this discussion before about, is there a requirement for a certificate of occupancy in every single case? And my answer to you is no, not in every case. However, if a person occupies a building and doesn't have the required C of O, and say the next tenant comes in and occupies that same space, but there's no certificate of occupancy issued for that space or that use, then yes, they would need to come in, even if they're going from an existing use to an existing use. And that would only be for their own protection. That would be for the protection of the person who's running the business. Again.
But the reason people don't do that is that you would come in, you'd go to the building department and fill out a building permit application for something you're not going to build, and then you'd have to come back and they'd send you up to I&I to fill out another application for something you're not going to build, and then when you don't build it, you have to get what you didn't build inspected, and then you get your CO.
Correct.
Okay.
But then your
that
business
seems a little silly, just between us kids.
So I get you.
When we've talked about this before, is there any way you can do a simple form CO? Like if I need, nothing's changing, I'm a dollar store to a dollar store and I want to go get financing, and my financing person says I need a CO. There should be a short form. I shouldn't have to fill out a building application for something I'm not going to build and go to I&I for something I'm not going to build and get it inspected that I didn't build. Seems silly.
Unfortunately, we have no fast track where a person can fill out one form and say, hey, I'm here, I've always been here, I'm going to be here. Unfortunately, we don't have that in our ordinance. So,
But, which begs the question, is that just a rewrite of 741? Could you put a little tagline, none of the above applies, and outline the circumstances? In that case, I can give you a short form CO.
no, because everything always applies. Unfortunately, if you have a code violation in an existing building, there is no statute of limitations on life safety. So again, this is for life safety and for use. Basically, that's what so we don't have the authority. I can't grant the authority to occupy a building through any other process other than a building permit application. That's the way it has to come.
How about a short form building permit application for work that's not going to be done? Just a separate, because the permit itself, the application is like 5 pages long, and if you're not doing any work, you fill like 2 things out. So
correct.
Okay.
So it's the same. It's as simple as having a 1-page form. But we could. That's good. I will take that under advisement. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Great.
That would be good.
Yeah. Good.
Because then you would actually have people coming
Right.
to get a CO versus
Sure.
just saying, well, I'm not going to go down and go through that craziness.
I get it.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Lisa.
I just want to reiterate what you were saying before. So I'm an existing store, or I opened up a store 10 years ago, and I did all this building, all this stuff. I didn't get a CO. Now I'm selling it to somebody else. No change. They're coming in. They do need to get a CO because you got to pay for the guy before you who didn't get one. Is that correct?
Correct. I'll give you an example. There was a body shop that pre-existed the ordinance where you needed a special permit for a body shop. That person, before he sold the property, said, what do I have to do to make this legitimate? And I said, well, here it is. You need a simple floor plan. You need to have emergency lights and illuminated exit signs. You have to have fire extinguishers. You have to have the fire department come through, take a look at it. The I&I, it existed over 5 years. That's the one thing about the I&I. If it existed over 5 years and there's no change of use, then that's not required. So that's one of the things that you can look into to try to relieve that requirement. But again, that person had to go through all those requirements, and at the end, they were able to legitimize and sell that business as a legitimate business. They had a certificate of occupancy for a pre-existing non-conforming body shop, and off to the sunset he sailed, down to Florida to retire. So
Okay.
so not every story has a bad ending, but. Can a person or owner get a written opinion about the use they are proposing and what is allowed? The answer to that is no. I have been told by my attorneys that I do not have the authority to give written opinions about zoning because it could become detrimental in a future case, or simply that I just don't have any authorization in my ordinance to give a written opinion about zoning uses or give authority to anything other than a building permit. So
this is one that's causing a lot of
Oh,
angst
sure
in the
is,
city
yeah.
because in the past we used to get those opinions, and so fairly recently you've been told not to issue those, and so people want to. The only way a person can find out if it's an allowed use. So I'm at Moody Street again. I want to put in something. Is it an allowed use? I have to, before I sign a lease, I want to be smart. I'm not going to sign a lease, and I want to know if it's an allowed use. You can't tell me yes or no. The only way you can tell me is if I do the building permit application. Okay. Well, with the problem there is I got to get that signed by the owner. The owner's not going to sign my building permit application if I haven't signed a lease. So I'm almost compelled to sign the lease in order to get a building permit application signed so that I can find out if I can use the place for the intended use.
Correct.
That doesn't work.
Right. So in stipulation, it's always a smart business move to always have a clause in there and always have a disclaimer that if I can't get a permit for this lease is null and void. So that's a good, smart business decision that someone would want to make. That, okay, Mr. Moody Street, I'll be more than happy to rent your space, but I've got to be able to legally occupy this, because otherwise I'm committed for a year, 2 or 5 years, and if I don't have a guarantee that I can start my business, then it's all for moot. So this is what private attorneys do. They examine zoning, and they are the ones who can examine the zoning ordinance, make sure that you have the rights, because again, these are by right uses. If we're talking about a by right use, or whether it's a special permit or a ZBA variance, in any one of those cases, it's always a good idea to, not even an attorney, but somebody who's well qualified to be able to look at the zoning ordinance and tell you whether or not you fit into that category. Again, I can only make determinations through through a building permit application. That's the only mechanism in the zoning ordinance that allows me to do that.
That's because of 3.31A,
That's correct.
which states that unless it says you can do it, you can't do it.
Not only that, but there is nothing in the ordinance that says the building official can give a written determination prior to the issuance of, or prior to the acceptance of a building permit application. So we just want to make sure that people understand that we can give plenty of guidance at the counter, and this is one thing that most times verbal guidance on the ordinance, what the ordinance allows, can be made at the counter, and you're going to have to, until we have something in front of us documented that says that, listen, I'm just going to be a convenience store, there was a convenience store there, then we can't really make that determination because we don't know that your convenience store is going to be selling fast food. We just don't know.
Councilor Logan put forth a resolution which would change 3.31A to allow you more discretion. So I assume, is it an ordinance change, or this is just, if we rewrote the ordinance, then you could actually, if I came up and said building department, can I open this store here, you'd be able to do that, if the ordinance allowed it.
So, yes, if it was written in the ordinance that I had the discretion to write zoning determinations, in fact, there are communities in and around the greater Boston area. In fact, Newton has what's called, the Commissioner of Inspection Services in the city of Newton is allowed to write what's called a consistency ruling.
Correct.
Where a consistency ruling would, based on the information that the commission has given, can write a determination based on what he sees in front of him. But it still gives him the right to deny a permit at the time of the issuance. So if there's some significant change from what you said you were going to do, now that permit may be denied for that particular reason. Right. The town of Plymouth has what's called, there's actually a zoning permit that allows for a person to apply without having to draw up the expensive plans, just be able to apply for the use and basically make a determination on just the use. And those things can be changed in the ordinance. I wouldn't support them, and I wouldn't be against them, but unfortunately, because the words say what they say, I'm limited to what the zoning ordinance gives me the authority to do. So I would be more than happy to do it, except that I'm restrained from doing it because of the ordinance. So that would be up to the city council and to the people of Waltham if they wanted to make a change to that. So
when a new business is coming in, all the things that they have to budget for, they really should be budgeting for an attorney to help them guide through a lot of this.
Not all the time. Not all the time.
Okay.
I'm not telling anybody they should have an attorney before they do anything, but it's always good to have somebody who is knowledgeable. There are plenty of people who navigate their own projects that are knowledgeable with the specific requirements of the local jurisdiction that they're in, whether it be Waltham, Newton, or otherwise, that know their stuff and don't get into any trouble because they have the business, the business know-how, whatever it might be, to make sure. But it's always your best bet to have somebody that can legally, represent you for your rights to be able to do what you want to do. I mean, this is a free country. We all have rules we have to follow by,
right.
but not in every case do you need an attorney.
But if you think you're going to have some sort of zoning issues, really, would you?
Yeah, if you're doing something significantly different, it's always a good idea to speak to somebody. Yeah. And again, you can always come to the building department, and we will give you the best, most accurate answers that we can give without, telling you that's okay. Until we have a building permit application, that's the only way that we can determine whether something complies or it's in violation, and that's how we do it. So, just some final thoughts, and we'll segue right into that. Is that you probably would not want to sign a lease without checking with a professional first. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an attorney, but when you're going to sign a lease and you're committed to that money, it's always a good idea to seek out a professional, somebody that at least can give you an idea. As a private citizen, I have a great deal of construction background, and I used to write contracts, and I did a lot of stuff. And from time to time, someone will ask me to to step in and help them with a certain thing. Maybe they're in violation in another town, and I'll come in and I'll try to help them out. But always try to connect with somebody who has knowledge about this stuff, and try not to get yourself in deeper than you need to be. Again, because these are things that we never want to see anybody perish in the business world. I mean, we want business to thrive in Waltham, and we want to assist people in getting them compliant so that they can open the door every single morning knowing that they've complied with every ordinance and every law in the city, and that their business is legitimate. Because, again, without these requirements, your business is not legitimate, and you don't want that to happen to a person, you know. You can always come to the department first. Doug, I know you've called me on a number of occasions. You can always call me with a specific question, especially if there's someone who is having a problem trying to get a permit, and if there's something that needs to be expedited or something that needs to be understood. I'm always available to answer questions and try to, you know, mitigate some of those more frustrating processes in getting this done. Yeah. But do you have any final comments?
Well, one, I do want to add that you and your department, they've been great to us for a Downtown Waltham partnership. We do a lot of the signs, and some of the businesses are starting to come to us. So we really appreciate any time that we go down there. You guys are great, and it's all a team effort. You know, like you said, at the end of the day, we want to see Moody and Maine and the rest of Waltham, you know, thrive and become this great city, even better than what we are now. Mm-hmm. So I say we should do a project. I know you and I have talked about it, and it's Doug as well. Is we should probably come up with some sort of handbook, kind of, you know, a pamphlet of coming to Waltham, what's next, and you know, highlight some of these bullet points, because it is a very daunting process to come in, and he and I have had the luxury of helping some of the businesses navigate through. And we're also in the process of helping other businesses still trying to navigate through it. So I think that would be, you know, very beneficial.
My final thought would be, if you specifically talk about the downtown, if you're thinking of signing a lease, before you sign the lease, do your homework, and/or if you sign the lease, make sure you have it subject to me being able to use the place as I so intend. Mm-hmm. Because some people have come to us a little too late. They've signed a lease, and there's no outs, and they have no clue, and they've got to bring everything up to code, and they just go out of business.
Great. Well, those are excellent thoughts, and I thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And again, at any time you want, the building department's open from 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. We're located at 119 School Street, and the Downtown Waltham Partnership is located where?
We're actually housed in the Chamber of Commerce at
84 South Street.
84 South Street.
84 South Street. So you can go there anytime. And we hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.